Okay, welcome to the Cinder meeting for October 27, 2021. All right, got some announcements. So just a reminder to people who are on European summertime, it ends this weekend. So next Cinder meeting is going to be an hour earlier for you. So do whatever you need to do to make sure you show up on time. All right, and just in general, this is week R-22. And milestone 1 is R-19, so that's pretty fast. So it's the week of November 15th. And our first mid-cycle is on December 1st, so roughly a month away. So just to give you an idea, stuff that we wanted to do for milestone 1, so I should put this in the agenda. Oh, I guess I should be writing this in the meeting also. Okay, so right, sorry, I'm kind of disorganized, but get over it. Okay, so stuff we've got. Yeah, I should say I don't have the summary finished yet, but you can always look at the Etherpad from the PTG to see what we talked about and remind yourself. So key things that we wanted to do for milestone 1. All right, so we had some stuff for OS Brick in particular. And those are the PGP encryption and the NVMe agent. Oh, GPG, thank you. Well, those are, it would be, yes, we would like to do those by milestone 1. So those are low impact on everything else in OS Brick. They're isolated, so we need to pay attention to them. I'll get links later because I don't have them open at the moment. The other key thing we wanted to do in Cinder is the secure RBAC stuff, which we had thought was all planned out, but it turns out is not. So hopefully we'll be able to get that settled fast. There's a secure RBAC pop-up team. As far as I'm aware, they're actually meeting tomorrow, so I've got something on the agenda. But if you're interested in this, that's the information about the pop-up team that meets every 2 weeks. And then their agenda, shoot, is here. Just lost my Etherpad, shoot. Okay, so if you're interested in this, I know Alan is, possibly Rajat and Sophia, who've worked on this before. Gorka, just in general, you were contributing to the discussion.
I wouldn't actually say that I'm interested, but
you know, as in everything, right? There's stuff everyone's got to do, whether they like it or not, just to keep things moving along. And this is pretty much one of those. When we get on the other side of this, it's going to be nice. But right now, this sucks in a major way, I must admit. I should be much more optimistic about it. So this is an exciting opportunity for everyone to make improvements to OpenStack. So please don't feel like you got to leave it up to the people who've been working on it so far. Feel free to pitch in. I started revising. What I'm going to have to do, well, it depends on how everything gets settled. I'm hoping things get settled fast because there was a long discussion that you may or may not have paid attention to at the PTG on Friday that a lot of us went to because I canceled everything else. I think there's sort of a consensus there. I've had second thoughts about, I was really insisting that we should never use the word admin anymore. I've had some second thoughts about that because for backward, well, anyway, so I think it's going to be fine, but I think we need to have a campaign in OpenStack that admin means admin, and that's what it means. And then, right, so if you make somebody an admin, watch out. So as long as everybody's aware of that, I think that's cool. And then we have to sort out the other things. But it looks like the project, I don't care what they call it, the project manager's fine. It'll work for us. The only thing I'm not clear on is exactly how we sort out the system scope stuff. Well, anyway, those are details. We'll worry about those at the meeting tomorrow. So hopefully they actually are having this meeting.
Sorry, Brian, when you say you're not sure about the system scope stuff, do you mean the list of volumes or the cluster service and volume type?
Yeah, what I meant was the cluster service, the cluster, the services, right. Sorry, I should have said this differently. Right. So I think we understand what the personas should do, although it's not what's listed on our personas doc because that's changed. But right. So the system scope, the system admin, system member, system reader will only be able to affect the system itself and not mess around with project level resources. So I think that's clear. My question is just the technical means of recognizing a system admin was having the admin role and system scope, and I'm not sure we can reuse the admin role. I'm not sure. So I'll have to, that was my question about that. So just a technical thing about how we will recognize such a person in our policy configuration. The question about listing all volumes, I think we're going to have to go with the domain reader to do that. But I'm not quite sure about that either. So the idea would be, if you're a domain reader, you can see all the stuff that's in the project that's in your domain. And I think they either, if they don't have a way to recognize the root domain, they'll have to just build it in, because I don't know how else you would do that. Well, I guess I don't know. So we'll just check with the experts tomorrow to see. So we have a couple. So if you're interested, either ping me or show up at the meeting, and you can follow the discussion. But we need to get those things sorted out. I've started revising. So I've got to completely revise the Xena policy document to remove, well, anyway, I got to do that. And then I have a patch up for specs for revising the Xena spec and moving some of the implementation to Yoga. And there was a spec for that, but I've got to completely rewrite that now as soon as I figure out what's going on with this. So that's probably more than you wanted to hear. So we were hoping to get that done by milestone 1. We'll have to see. But in terms of spending your reviewing time wisely, you can't go wrong with looking at the GPG stuff and the NVMe OF agent patch. And so please do that. Okay. Yeah, so I should write these. So key priorities, OS, brick. Okay. Okay. And I think that's all the announcements I've got. Let's move on. So into actual topics. So last time I mentioned the Gerrit interface changed, and there's some weird stuff in there that you can explore. I did find that somebody had mentioned this on the service discuss mailing list, not the main mailing list. So there's a link that I will now put to IRC. So that new business is called an attention set, and you can add people to it and remove them. I haven't explored it, but it's something to be aware of as a new feature we can use.
So I've looked at this a little bit,
Okay.
and it's worth noting that if you just use Gerrit kind of with the same flow that we always have and that we're used to using, this will do the wrong thing by default. And it will put people in the attention set saying that they should do something next when that is not the case. So the case I saw was when you go put the first +2 on a patch, it'll tell the submitter that it's their turn to do something when it's very clearly by our process that we need another core to review it.
I think what it's doing is that when you put any comment, if you do a +1 or a +2, if you write anything in the comments field, that's what triggers the attention set on the submitter. So if you just did a vote without writing anything, I don't think it triggers the attention set. But as you say, Eric, that's not what we do. We always write something in the comments.
In fact,
yeah, so I'm not sure what.
Oh gosh. Okay. Yeah. So anyway, so we may need to take this up with the OpenDev team to see if there are ways to configure this. I don't know. So this may or may not be useful. The reason I brought it up last time was that if you are when that comment thing shows up, it shows up as unresolved unless you hack it or hit done or something. So from your perspective of submitting patches, please go back and check them and make sure that you acknowledge, because I've personally been sloppy about that in the past. I mean, if the thing's addressed, I don't go back but anyway, you may need to do that now. We just have to learn. We'll have to adjust to this and see if we can also make the system adjust to us.
I've been watching that for a couple of days now, and I've worked out sort of the way it works. If you go into your dashboard, you get a new field right at the very top. That's everything that's your attention is required, which is particularly annoying. But when you go into a patch, your name will have like a double black arrow next to it, and your name will be highlighted. If you just click on the double black arrow, that will take you off the attention set. That's the quickest way of hacking it.
Okay.
Regarding the +2 issue, I guess we can modify the attention when we down the comment. On the bottom there is a field called bring attention off, and then you can check the ones you want to bring attention.
You can disable ones you don't want the attention to go to.
Yeah, and then it wouldn't require any other step in the case of +2 or one when you are not.
It's just an extra step we have to think about when we're doing any voting. So when you're voting, you have to click at the bottom and say, don't bother telling this person.
Yeah, we'll try to work this out. So if you continue to come up with tips for how to use this thing, and we'll have to adjust or figure out something. So lots of fun. Okay, that's all I got to say about Gerrit. So Simon's up next with, it's basically the backports. So how far so we've gotten to Wallaby?
So we've got the patches in for Wallaby, and I've got 1+2. Thanks Rajat this morning for that. So we need to get this one back. The other thing I was going to ask about this was, once we have them merged into the stable branches, what's the process we then have to go through to get a new build of OS Brick done?
We just have to propose a release. Right. But the way we propose them, right? We split up the ordering somehow.
Yeah. So we'll merge with Xena, so we should probably try and maybe put a new OS Brick for Xena.
Right. Well, we can. So we're aiming for, it's the week of November 8th is the final Ussuri release.
That's the important thing, is to get it down there and then cut that release before.
Right. But we want the other ones to be released first. So I guess basically we're gonna have to do a release of everything before then. But that's okay.
Unless we get people to vote on these patches.
Right. So they got to get merged first, and
Yeah.
then we'll handle the release stuff. But right, we can just make if we make the release patches depend on each other, it'll sort of take care of itself. So we'll have new releases of everything basically at the same time as the Ussuri release.
Yeah.
Okay.
We just need cores to go on and. I mean, it's a pretty simple patch. So you just.
Okay.
As soon as the Wallaby one merges, I'll pull up a Victoria and then I'll do an Ussuri as soon as that merges. I'm just keeping an eye on it all the time.
Okay.
So we already did a release recently, so I don't think there will be much patches for the new release. So I think only few modules will be affected.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I'll let you handle taking a look at that to see what's up. Okay.
So I just want Etherpad link. So if anyone else wants to get their patches into Ussuri, they can add it to that Etherpad.
I think we should probably add the patch that is currently on review for supporting multipath enabled kernel. It's from Stohart. We discussed it on the video. I started reviewing. I have a couple of comments, but I haven't submitted it yet. It's basically when you're running OS break on a host where the kernel has a native NVMe multipath enabled that changes some names currently, the way they are presented, and I think they are not properly detected. I have I added some comments, but I want to actually run the patch, confirm that everything works and all that. But I think that's probably something we want to backport since Ussuri already supported NVMe.
Okay.
So Gokha, can you provide the link? I can add it to the Etherpad then.
There you go. Just put it in.
Okay.
That's enough.
Right one, isn't it, Gorka?
All right. So stable cores, please keep an eye on the Etherpad that Rajat has linked in the agenda, and
I'm going to use attention sets when the patches go up, and I'll drop the cores on the attention set.
so right, and so the problem is if you have too much stuff to pay attention to, you don't pay attention to anything. But okay, so use your appropriate means that works for you of paying attention to stuff, and please pay attention to these things. Okay. I think that's it for stable releases. So, right, Ussuri's going to extended maintenance mode. That means no more releases. So if you do notice something that would be good to include, please put on the Etherpad. And that applies to, right, all our deliverables except cinderlib. Or does it? Is cinderlib in Ussuri? I guess, oh. UVW. Yeah, anyway. So it applies to basically all our deliverables. So take a look and be aware of that. Okay, great. Next thing, we got something new on the agenda, allowing live migration on instances. Let me put this in the IRC. Roman, are you here?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me loud and clear?
I can. And what's your actual name?
Christian. Roman is the last name. Christian.
Okay, great. All right. So Christian has a question, and here we go.
Yeah. First of all, there's a blueprint. I'd just like to get some feedback if you like it at all. If you don't like it, why dive into the details? But if you'd consider allowing an instance to be live migrated, if the storage, namely in our case would be the Rados block device, so Ceph, would allow the volume to not be affected in any way. So to live, even though the volume has been backed up, while the instance is migrated to allow that for certain storage backends that have that capability. So and then I have a few implementation detail questions I'd like to clarify. Namely how to handle the status. I can easily filter or allow that volume being in a state of backing up while being live migrated. Just add it to the list of allowed states. That's what I meant with extending that little bit of the API. But how to deal with the state then? Because there's only one state a volume can be in. And if it's backing up and then there's a live migration happening, it would override the state after that live migration to be in use, and that backing up would be lost. So yeah, that would be the implementation question I have.
Not to lose the field, you can use, we have a kind of a previous status field where you can store the status where the volume was before. But I believe then if we use that field, then we confirm the actual name. It's previous underscore status, we have it, but I believe probably the backup also uses it. I'm not completely sure. So, I mean, if you don't want to lose it, you could store it there and then get it back when you're finishing the operation. I think backup may already be using it.
All right, didn't spot that yet. So would that, the whole idea in general, would that be like something you would accept a patch for? So we would implement that and use that, as you said, Gorka, that field to store that state to give it back to the volume after the migration is done. But well, in our case, we did a bit of math. If you have very large volumes, that can block live migration for quite a while. Even though if you have a very fast storage, offsite storage connection, it would still be minutes or many minutes, and the user can do backups whenever they want. So they can lock us out from getting that machine empty forever. So that was the driver for the whole idea.
Well, but did I hear that this behavior is going to be driver dependent? That RBD driver will let you migrate a volume being backed up, but if another driver doesn't, then where is the validation done to confirm that this particular driver supports the feature?
Yeah, good question. That's the last question on my list of question that I came up with. Certainly, you hit me with other problems or ideas. Yes, that's something that is driver dependent because you need to be able to do online backups. So while the volume is being attached to a different instance and that sort, so it cannot be a migration of an LVM or something similar. So there is certainly storage backends that will not support this. But yeah, Ceph will happily do that because there's a snapshot created that has a completely different life cycle from the actual volume that is attached to the instance. So yes, that's another question. Should we introduce a driver feature? That I believe there's some sort of a feature list that a driver has, or could it be a configuration option that the user or the admin of the installation needs to be aware of? Can I enable that, or how should that be done?
I think the other question
is
what would be your thoughts around if we go down this road and the backup is started obviously before the live migration, but the backup completes during the live migration. That's going to then change that field and the previous field. And if you're trying to reset it from the previous field, which was backing up, it's no longer backing up. So you're setting it to a wrong field. You're setting it to a wrong value. So we need to be careful about that.
I'm more worried about what Alan said, because I was thinking the same thing, that this is not only driver dependent, but it depends because so when the backup receives the request, so the problem is that you don't know until you reach the volume or backup level. You don't know if you can actually do it or not. And so the Ceph backup driver cannot tell you if it can do it or not. And the Cinder volume for the migration, if you're doing a backup and you tell Cinder volume to do a migration, how does it know that the backend of the backup is actually Ceph? It doesn't know. And we have currently weird backup configuration options where you can have a different backup service on each of your hosts. So it doesn't have to be the same backend for the backups in all your backup services.
Yeah, good point. Good point. Yeah, you cannot know, even though the primary storage or the volume storage driver might tell you, but yes, you're correct. The backup driver is actually the one you need to look at, and you don't know. Yeah, so it has to be, if you go along that path, it has to be a configuration option, because that consistency of will it actually work, you don't know at runtime.
But the problem with configuration options is that if you have multiple Cinder volume backends and you have multiple backup backends, it may be a matrix where some combinations work, some doesn't. So a single configuration option may be complicated to actually define which combinations work.
Yeah, good point. I haven't thought of that misalignment or actually that combination of multiple combinations there. Yeah.
Are you aware of any other backend that can actually do this well, except besides Ceph?
Oh, certainly everything that does a so there's a snapshot being created on the volume storage, and then that snapshot is being sent off to whatever backup driver you have. So in theory, it should work with actually with any. Well, think about it, with any backup implementation, because it depends on the primary storage that the backup can happen online, because it does an instant snapshot of the block storage, and it will then ship it off. But that shipping off is out of the loop then, because the live migration is actually only related to the block storage or the virtual device that's hooked up to the instance. So the backup driver is actually not in question here.
But most backups, so most storage drivers cannot do live migration with volume. We don't allow when it has a snapshots, because when you go and try to delete the volume, it may have a snapshot. The one that backup created, because the volume was in use. So you start creating your backup, you create, the volume is in use, you create a snapshot, you create a volume from that snapshot so that you can do a backup. And now you do a live migration on a volume that has a snapshot. And when the live migration completes and Cinder tries to delete that volume, it will have a problem because it has a temporary snapshot from the backup.
So are you talking about live migration just of Nova instances and keeping the storage on the same back end?
Yes.
Oh, so it's not volume live migration, it's instance live migration. Okay.
Yes. Sorry about the confusion. Yes.
No, my fault.
Yes.
Yeah, so most drivers, most storage backends will be able to deal with that if they're using snapshotting. If they cater to snapshotting, then yes, it should work. As long as you're not as long as the volume isn't being migrated as well during the live migrator, that will cause horrendous issues.
But that's a condition that's been checked in code, right? If you do that's a condition that is already checked for other reasons, that whether it's a block level volume migration or not, or if that volume is being migrated via the live migration mechanism, or if it's just using the underlying storage that has the capability of attaching it somewhere else.
Yeah, I don't think this is as complicated as I thought, because like Simon said, this is probably supported by all backends. So there may not be a necessity to check with the volume and the backup drivers to see if this is possible, which great. I mean, it simplifies the API check because it should be possible with all combinations of volume and backups.
Yeah, it's just a matter of making sure your process flow around your flag, your volume status flag, is followed correctly, and you catch all of those edge cases.
Yeah, that was actually the point I was considering joining your meeting here and exchanging a few thoughts, because that was the complicated bit I was hitting at, whether you'd like that volume can have a different state. It's been migrated, or not the volume is migrated, but the instance has been in migration, and that touches the volume status of being attaching or reserved and so on. But it's only one single state. But now I got that there's a previous status, but there's two life cycles happening, or two different statuses that the volume can be in. The one from the backup process and the one from the live migration, and I don't want to lose that state with the two different actions happening at the same time or on the same resources.
Probably we can change the backup driver, the backup code, to use attachments instead of doing the connection directly. Because one of the things that happen is Nova normally uses the new attach API, which uses this attachment idea, which is a database record where we store that there is actually somebody using a volume, and then the status of the volume change based on the attachments. So if you have one attachment, it becomes in use. You have two attachments, it is still being in use. And if you remove one of them, but still have one, it is still in use. Until you don't remove them all, you don't become available. So maybe we can explore in changing that behavior or extending it so the backup service uses that, live migration uses that, in somehow the status change, and you can work that way, but that's probably more complicated. Never mind. I'm just I was thinking that other route because I'm a little afraid that we are going to start dancing with multiple levels of statuses. We have the original in use, backing up, live migrating, and then we can have reverse, in use, live migrating, backing up. So.
Yep, that's exactly what I was afraid of, or what I wanted to clarify, yes. Because for the attachment part, there is a dedicated field to hold that state of a volume, but for the general status, there's just status, and Yeah, it's not a finite state machine. It can be in multiple of those states. Well, technically it could be. So, but yes, you're keeping the current mechanisms keep it from reaching multiple states at once. But technically or practically, it would not, as we established, it would not be an issue to be attaching while being backed up or while being resized or whatever the storage can do at the same time.
I mean, it feels to me like it needs an additional flag of like backup status or something like that as a temporary space. You know, having that additional, so you don't put backing up in volume status, but then what else checks for backing up in the volume status? And it feels like we need a backup status parameter as well, field as well.
Yeah, it's probably easier said than done. Certainly you can introduce a new field, but then everything that depends on it will get hurt.
Yeah.
Same goes for allowing more than one status. Right, so same thing.
Whilst this would be probably fairly simplistic, it's that highlighted use, at least that highlighted use case I put in there of the backup completing during the live migration that's going to really mess it up. And that's what you have to cater for, is these edge cases.
What about locking that any of the two processes from being successful until the other one is done? Is that, well, probably the same issue I'm trying to avoid of interconnecting things, right?
You just lock everything up, so you back to where you started.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, because the alternative of killing the backup, which in most drivers you can actually do, you can abort a backup process, but that would leave the backup that was initiated in an error state, which we don't want.
Yeah, certainly needs a bit more thinking. I just wanted to bring up the idea actually and see if that's even something you'd like to pursue at all, the whole blueprint idea. And certainly we got our hands dirty, just allowing the volume to be in the state backing up. It will then work. Live migration certainly works. There's no problem, but we want to do it properly and get that upstream. So that's why I was bringing the whole topic up. So, but there's so many implications. There's so many different ways to likely implement that in a either clean or at least having some sort of style of implementing that. That's certainly we want to do the way you'd like it implemented. Makes the most sense.
Yeah, I think we need to think about it some more. I put a link in there to the specs repository. So you can write up a spec for this, which is more detailed than a blueprint, but it'll give you a chance to work out some of these issues. So there's a template that'll give you kind of a guided, basically the issues we'd be interested in, but it'll give us something to work on to look at this. I think this is a good idea because, right, it's a pretty common problem. I mean, Walt's been working on some stuff with the backup driver because some of the backups just take forever to complete because they're so freaking big, and things are not going to get smaller, even if they get faster. So we do need to figure this out. What I was thinking was Nova has like a tab. This is a different thing. So in addition to the status of an instance, they also have a task state that allows you to distinguish what's happening within the major state. We don't have anything like that. I don't know that they have anything that would address this case where there are multiple statuses that would apply to an instance and how they track that. But that might be something to ask somebody working on Nova if they have any. So they might not have to handle this particular problem. On the other hand, they may have worked something out that we could adapt, is all I'm saying.
I mean, what you have is you have a dedicated resource called backup, and that's, well, been happening, but that's a reverse relation to the volume. So it's not actually maintaining a state of the volume, but it's you'd be able to find that there's a backup still being created while the volume might have lost that state already. But this sounds to me quite hacky to kind of reverse look for a backup that is targeting or that's originating from this volume you're now looking at. So that's to use that, I suppose.
Yeah, the backup has a record of the original volume in which it was coming from, and to address
and a state of being still in the process of being created, right? So you would, in theory, be able to look up whether there is a backup still happening for that volume. So in reverse, that means the volume is being backed up. So that was the hacky idea I just had.
Yes, I believe the actual volume that's being backed up is in a backing up state as well. If I remember correctly, it's been a couple months since I've worked on this, but the patch that I have up is to, like Brian said, address some of the really long backups, and I guess it's an merge conflict. I need to work on that and get that merged. But would it be helpful if the original volume that you are backing up if it doesn't, has a state of being backed up? Because it really shouldn't be. I don't know. It's hard to say because I was going to say it shouldn't be touched while it's being backed up, but in some cases the drivers actually make a clone before they do, and the cloning can take forever too, and that's part of the reason why I created my patch is to help that as well.
Well, actually, the volume has a field, has the status field, and that has a value of backing up. Okay. That is the current state, yes. And the thing is, during another, if you allow another task like the live migration of an instance, and that volume being attached, or the attachment changes from one host machine to be on another host machine, that status field is overwritten or is changed from a different process, from this migration process of being reserved and attached and so on. And then you would lose if you allowed two processes to happen at the same time, which will technically work just fine. We tried that and it works, yes. But you would lose that state information because you can only write one state, one value in that field of a volume, yes.
I see. This kind of gets to another issue that I wanted to address at the PGG that I didn't attend, but Nova has a table in the database that keeps track of actions that are being taken against instances, and I wanted to look at implementing that for Cinder for volumes, so that way we could, for cases like this where bugs come up that we didn't think about, or situations that we didn't think about that didn't address that causes the state to be weird in this case, that we'd be able to go back and track how the volume got into that state, such as a live migration causing the state to change. We would have seen a record in that table saying, oh, the volume isn't backing up and someone kicked off a live migration which caused the state to do this. And as someone who manages a very large deployment of Cinder, I really desperately want this because we often have inconsistencies between Nova and Cinder and the state of a particular volume, whether it's attached or not. Sometimes, recently, we have an issue where we have volumes that have like 10 BDM entries and they're all bogus, and we don't have any idea how that happens. So I know I apologize for not attending the PGG, but I think there is some value to getting some kind of a state or action tracking in Cinder to track what is going on with volumes. It doesn't help your particular case where we have a bug in this case, it seems like, but it might help in general for issues that you can't quite figure out in the future.
Quick question.
Yeah, but that certainly is a bigger leap than I was expecting to be even be able to talk about, is implementing what you said, tasks that are currently happening on the volume, because there can be multiple tasks that the volume is being targeted by at the same time. As I said, backing up and live migration or resizing, or you can add more likely if you can think of certain storage drivers in the backend. So certain things that happen, but they don't actually affect the state. The state of the volume should be, at least to me, to remain about the usable state for the user. Is it actually attached currently? Is it in use? Is it an error state? But not everything that you can do on a volume, like from the storage implementation point of view, can be added to a single field, because you end up with more and more collisions there. If you loosen up that strict only one thing can happen at a time paradigm, if you
Yes.
loosen that up, you will likely end up having to implement something else like tasks.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the reasons why we actually eventually years ago had to add a migration status field in the volumes table as well, because you need to be tracking the migration status as well as state, whether it's successful or not, as well as the volume state too. So I mean, it's I don't know how to solve this in general without adding n number of state fields or tracking, but it still seems like an issue.
Two things. Walter, are you using Cinder CSI on those VMs, on that deployment?
In some of them, yes, but in some of them, they're just normal Nova attachments.
Because we know we have a bug that leaves that. And I think I have a patch. I don't know if it's merged or not, but there was a case where that would happen. Nova would leave the instance, would think that the volume is attached, and Cinder would say, no, it's detached. Yeah, I have a patch for that, and maybe that can help. And Christian, I think we may have I think the problem with, I like the idea, but I see a lot of problems with how we are going, the number of things we're going to have to change in the API, because right now Nova uses the reserved state in a volume to kind of lock it, so that they know that that process is the only one operating on it and things like that. But if we allow to have backing up, then reserve, and suddenly it needs to change to in use for Nova to operate. And now we want to abort the backup. Now we cannot abort. The original user that requested the backup will see that the volume status has changed. For them, it should be backing up. Now it's in use. They may think that the operation has completed, but it hasn't actually completed. It's that it's doing a migration on the Nova side. So this can be kind of weird for them. And if there's a way for Nova to kind of ignore the status that Cinder has, instead of in use, to be backing up or something like that, maybe it can be done. But I think that's something we also have to be careful, because the status from the user's perspective should not change. Right?
Right, yeah. It's always a question of exposing something that is technically required. So in the backend, if you, or something that it's of interest to the user. As for the live migration, in our case, users, they shouldn't care. So that's something that, but you're correct. I mean, yes, you expose that to the user, and we're actually expecting their own, or the state that they initiated would remain on that volume. But now there's infrastructure side tasks like live migration, and that also changes the state, which, well, for us, we wouldn't need. So it's another layer, like what to expose to the user and what happens behind the scenes, right? So,
well, yeah, but from this feature point of view, the status should be kept on what the user, on the operation that was triggered on Cinder. And I'm not sure that Nova would like that and would be able to work with that, with backing up, taking priority over the normal status changes of the volume. I mean, instead of changing to reserve in use, and although attaching in use, because it has like 3 statuses.
All this needs more thought. The proposed spec to be written, would that be the next sensible step of getting our thought? Certainly it needs some time to. We're not that experienced in getting in all the dependencies and the edge cases and use cases, and that's why I came, and we'd gladly go to the next step, even if it doesn't work out, if it's too complicated or it requires major changes, but at least just to think it through and to see what's possible and what's maybe enabling this without changing the whole way Cinder or Nova works and the inner workings.
The spec is definitely the way to go for something like this, because it's the form by which all of these sorts of issues are flushed out and addressed.
All right. So we then shall be getting our hands dirty and writing a spec.
And then something to keep in mind, we have a mid-cycle meeting on the 1st of December. So this would be a good thing to discuss there. So if you can get the spec started, I mean, so that's about a month. So if you can get the spec started, feel free to come back to the Cinder meeting to get feedback as you go if you have questions. But we can discuss this in detail and focus on it at the mid-cycle. I think it's definitely something we want to pursue. And everything's always complicated, so
yeah.
don't be too worried by that. But we just have to think about it some more. So the spec will be a good start. The template will guide you through, help you address some questions, and then I think aim for the mid-cycle meeting so we can have a full-blown discussion again and look at it carefully.
All right. Thank you very much for devoting that much time to this issue. Well, hope we get back with a helpful write-up of the whole idea in the spec.
All right, great.
Also, just for reference, we also allow downloading state in the current attachment flow. I think this might be due to the fact that with the instance create command, we could also create a bootable volume at the same time, and it might be due to that, but we allow that state, so you can take a reference from it.
Yeah, thank you. That I already spotted. Yeah, I didn't make a clue why and which use case that was for, but yes, you're correct. Yeah, we already spotted that there's a different state than in use that's also been ignored in that sense. All right, thank you again.
Thank you.
Great. Okay. All right. So one thing we talked about at the PTG was we want to continue working on the volume driver API clarification. We also want to continue working on mypy. I was going to say my original thought was we would have a function of the week and a mypy patch of the week. We may have to do alternating weeks in order to keep our meeting under an hour. So what I'd like to do is introduce this week's mypy patch of the week. All right, so the way this will work is, here's my proposal. I want to get 2 cores and 1 non-core to commit to reviewing this with the aim to have it merged by the next meeting, but at least have it reviewed carefully, and in case, you may come across something. But that's the goal. So we'll rotate through the cores and the non-cores who's got the responsibility. But I think if we do this, we'll finally get this thing done, because I think it's important to have type checking is going to help us maintain code quality. So we don't want to give up on that. And as Eric pointed out, until we get a sufficient amount of our code mypied, it doesn't actually help. So this is part of our drive to get that to happen. So let me look this, and I'll volunteer to be one of the reviewers on this.
Brian, should we have an etherpad with existing patches that Eric, because I believe Eric has a bunch of them, and we can just be picking the first one.
Yeah, I think if you look at the patch, they're stacked, so we can just grab the one on the bottom. Right. So that's another thing I guess I should say is feel free to review other patches. You don't have to only review this one. But let's see how this works. All right. So we need the cores. Who wants to volunteer to look at this?
This one already has a +2, I see.
Who +2'd it?
Sophia, I guess.
All right, so we'll put Sophia on it then. Thanks, Sophia. And it looks like Tushar also +1'd it. All right, so so it looks like it balls in my court to get this one through. Okay, great. So
on the driver side, I have the first 3 patches pushed. The one just that removes attach volume, detach volume. The one that merges check for setup errors with do setup. And the one that documents and fixes the inconsistencies in parameters for the clone image. Because the parameters were all wrong in most driver and interface methods, the clone image, and everything was wrong in that documentation. Literally everything. Return values, types of the parameters that are passed, because we say, ooh, we pass a string as the location. Nope, it's a tuple. And the first one is element is a string, and the second is a list of dictionaries. Awesome. So, yeah, it was pretty bad.
Okay. Well, thanks for taking that on. So, all right. So for the volume driver API improvement, please take a look at these patches of Gorkas and let's get those reviewed. Okay. So we are out of time. All right. So just quick recap for OS Brick for milestone 1. Let's focus on the GPG patches and the NVMeof connection agent. Secure RBAC is sort of up in the air, but we're working on that too. And we've got a list of patches on this Etherpad now for people to look at. Thanks for attending the meeting. I'll go ahead and stop the recording.